Chapter 11, Part 3 of How I Found Livingstone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How I Found Livingstone. Travels, Adventures, and Discoveries in Central Africa, including 4 months' residence with Dr. Livingstone, by Sir Henry M. Stanley. Chapter 11, Part 3. Through Ukawindi, Uvinza, and Uha to Ujiji. November 6th. At dawn we were on the road, very silent and sad. Our stock of cloth was much diminished. We had 9 bales left, sufficient to have taken us to the Atlantic Ocean, aided by the beads which were yet untouched, if we practiced economy. If I met many more like Mionvu, I had not enough to take me to Ujiji, and though we were said to be so near, Livingstone seemed to me to be just as far as ever. We crossed the Pombwe, and then struck across a slowly undulating plain rising gradually to mountains on our right, and on our left sinking towards the valley of the Malagarazi, which river was about 20 miles away. Villages rose to our view everywhere. Food was cheap, milk was plentiful, and the butter good. After a 4 hours' march we crossed the Kaningi River, and entered the boma of Kirihigi, inhabited by several Watusi and Waha. Here, we were told, lived the king of Uha's brother. This announcement was anything but welcome, and I began to suspect I had fallen into another hornet's nest. We had not rested 2 hours before 2 Wangwana entered my tent, who were slaves of Thani bin Abdullah, our dandified friend of Unyanyembe. These men came, on the part of the king's brother, to claim the honga. The king's brother demanded 30 doti, half a bale. Merciful Providence! What shall I do? We had been told by Mionvu that the honga of Uha was settled, and now here is another demand for the king's brother. It is the second time the lie has been told, and we have twice been deceived. We shall be deceived no more. These 2 men informed us there were 5 more chiefs, living but 2 hours from each other, who would exact tribute, or blackmail, like those we had seen. Knowing this much, I felt a certain calm. It was far better to know the worst at once. 5 more chiefs with their demands would assuredly ruin us. In view of which, what is to be done? How am I to reach Livingstone without being beggared? Dismissing the men, I called Bombay and told him to assist Asmani in settling the honga, as cheaply as possible. I then lit my pipe, put on the cap of consideration, and began to think. Within half an hour I had made a plan, which was to be attempted to be put in execution that very night. I summoned the 2 slaves of Thani bin Abdullah, after the honga had been settled to everybody's satisfaction, though the profoundest casuistries and diplomatic arguments failed to reduce it lower than 26 doti, and began asking them about the possibility of evading the tribute-taking Waha ahead. This rather astonished them at first, and they declared it to be impossible, but finally, after being pressed, they replied that one of their number should guide us at midnight, or a little after, into the jungle which grew on the frontiers of the Uha and Uvinza. By keeping a direct west course through this jungle until we came to Ukaranga, we might be enabled, we were told, to travel through Uha without further trouble. If I were willing to pay the guide 12 doti, and if I were able to impose silence on my people while passing through the sleeping village, the guide was positive I could reach Ujiji without paying another doti. It is needless to add that I accepted the proffered assistance at such a price with joy. But there was much to be done. Provisions were to be purchased, sufficient to last 4 days for the tramp through the jungle, and men were at once sent with cloth to purchase grain at any price. Fortune favored us, for before 8 p.m. we had enough for 6 days. November 7th. I did not go to sleep at all last night, but a little after midnight, as the moon was beginning to show itself, by gangs of 4 the men stole quietly out of the village, and by 3 a.m. the entire expedition was outside the boma, and not the slightest alarm had been made. After a signal to the new guide, the expedition began to move in a southern direction along the right bank of the Kanengi River. After an hour's march in this direction we struck west, across the grassy plain, and maintained it despite the obstacles we encountered, which were sore enough to naked men. The bright moon lighted our path. Dark clouds now and then cast immense long shadows over the deserted and silent plains, and the moonbeams were almost obscured, and at such times our position seemed awful. Till the moon, rising in clouded majesty, at length, apparent queen, unveiled her peerless light, and o'er the dark her silver mantle threw. Bravely toiled the men without murmur, though their legs were bleeding from the cruel grass. Ambrosial morn at last appeared, with all its beautiful and lovely features. Heaven was born anew to us, with comforting omens and cheery promise. The men, though fatigued at the unusual travel, sped forward with quicker pace as daylight broke, until at 8 a.m. we sighted the swift Rusugi River, when a halt was ordered in a clump of jungle near it, for breakfast and rest. Both banks of the river were alive with buffalo, eland, and antelope, but though the sight was very tempting, we did not fire, because we dared not. The report of a gun would have alarmed the whole country. I preferred my coffee, and the contentment which my mind experienced at our success. An hour after we had rested, some natives, carrying salt from the Malagarazi, were seen coming up the right bank of the river. When abreast of our hiding place, they detected us, and dropping their salt bags, they took to their heels at once, shouting as they ran, to alarm some villages that appeared about 4 miles north of us. The men were immediately ordered to take up their loads, and in a few minutes we had crossed the Rusugi, and were making direct for a bamboo jungle that appeared in our front. On, we kept steadily until at 1 p.m. we sighted the little lake of Musunya, as wearied as possible with our 9 hours' march. Lake Musunya is one of the many circular basins found in this part of Uhha. There was quite a group of them. The more correct term of these lakes would be immense pools. In the Masika season, Lake Musunya must extend to 3 or 4 miles in length by 2 in breadth. It swarms with hippopotami, and its shores abound with noble game. We were very quiet, as may be imagined, in our bivouac. Neither tent nor hut was raised, nor was fire kindled, so that in case of pursuit we could move off without delay. I kept my Winchester rifle, the gift of my friend Mr. Morris, and a rare gift it was for such a crisis, with its magazine full, and 200 cartridges in a bag slung over my shoulders. Each soldier's gun was also ready and loaded, and we retired to sleep our fatigues off with a feeling of perfect security. November 8th. Long before dawn appeared, we were on the march, and as daylight broke, we emerged from the bamboo jungle, and struck across the naked plain of Uhha, once more passing several large pools by the way, far embracing prospects of undulating country, with here and there a characteristic clump of trees relieving the general nudity of the whole. Hour after hour we toiled on, across the rolling land waves, the sun shining with all its wonted African fervor, but with its heat slightly tempered by the welcome breezes, which came laden with the fragrance of young grass and perfume of strange flowers of various hues, that flecked the otherwise pale green sheet which extended so far around us. We arrived at the Rugufu River, not the Ukawendi Rugufu, but the northern stream of that name, a tributary of the Malagarazi. It was a broad, shallow stream, and sluggish, with an almost imperceptible flow southwest. While we halted in the deep shade afforded by a dense clump of jungle, close to the right bank, resting a while before continuing our journey, I distinctly heard a sound as of distant thunder in the west. Upon asking if it were thunder, I was told it was Kabogo. Kabogo? What is that? It is a great mountain on the other side of the Tanganyika, full of deep holes, into which the water rolls, and when there is a wind on the Tanganyika, there is a sound like mvuha,